My brother Jake's words hit me like a slap across the face. Standing there at Dad's funeral podium, he delivered what should have been a loving eulogy. Instead, he turned it into his personal vendetta against me. 200 people stared. Some gasped. Others looked away in embarrassment. I sat frozen in the front pew, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white. My 16-year-old son Tommy reached over and squeezed my shoulder. His touch was the only thing keeping me from walking out. Jake continued his speech, painting himself as the devoted son who stayed close to home. He made me sound like the selfish daughter who abandoned the family for her career in California. Every word was calculated, every pause designed for maximum damage. Dad always said family comes first, Jake announced, his voice carrying across the packed church. Some of us remembered that. Others chose money over love. The lie burned in my chest like acid. 3 days earlier, I'd been managing my marketing firm in San Diego when the call came. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack while working in his garage. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. I dropped everything and flew to Ohio within hours. Jake had been there when I arrived at the family home. He seemed genuinely broken up about Dad's death. We hugged, we cried together. We even laughed while sharing old memories. That version of my brother had vanished completely. Now he stood at the podium like some righteous preacher, rewriting history with every sentence. According to Jake's version, I'd been absent for years. I'd missed birthdays, holidays, and important family moments. None of it was true. I visited Dad every few months. We talked on the phone twice a week. I'd even flown him out to California last Christmas so he could spend time with Tommy and me. But Jake's lies sounded convincing to people who didn't know the real story. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Don't let him do this to you, Mom." I looked at my son's determined face. He had Dad's stubborn chin and my green eyes. At 16, he was already taller than both his uncles and carried himself with quiet confidence. Jake wrapped up his character assassination disguised as a eulogy. People applauded politely, but the energy in the room felt wrong, uncomfortable. Several family friends avoided eye contact with me as Jake returned to his seat. The pastor took over for the closing prayers. I barely heard the words. My mind raced with questions. Why would Jake lie so publicly? What did he gain from humiliating me at our father's funeral? The answer came 2 hours later at the lawyer's office. Dad's attorney, Mr. Peterson, had requested that immediate family gather for the reading of the will. It was just Jake, his wife Linda, Tommy, and me sitting around the mahogany conference table. Peterson cleared his throat and began reading Dad's final wishes. The house went to Jake. No surprise there. He'd been living in the basement for the past 3 years after his second divorce. Dad's truck and tools went to Jake as well. That made sense, since Jake worked construction and could use them. Then came the shocker. To my daughter, Rebecca Martinez, I leave my entire investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $800,000. Jake's face went white. What? Peterson continued reading. Dad had been quietly investing for decades. He'd built a substantial nest egg that none of us knew about. There must be some mistake, Jake stammered. Dad wouldn't leave everything to her. She lives in California. She doesn't even visit. The will is quite clear, Peterson replied. It was updated just 6 months ago. Linda grabbed Jake's arm. 800,000? That's impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was real. Suddenly, Jake's funeral speech made perfect sense. He'd known about the money. He'd tried to turn the family against me before the will reading, hoping to create pressure for me to share the inheritance. The meeting ended with Jake storming out. Linda followed, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. Tommy and I drove back to Dad's house in silence. I needed time to process everything that had happened. The house felt empty without Dad's presence. His coffee cup still sat in the sink. His reading glasses lay folded on the kitchen table next to yesterday's newspaper. Mom, can I show you something? Tommy asked. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. I recorded Uncle Jake's speech, he said, but I also recorded something else. The video started playing. It showed Jake talking to Linda in the church parking lot before the service. Remember, I need everyone thinking she's a terrible daughter. Jake's voice came through clearly. Once they hear about the money, they'll pressure her to do the right thing and split it with me. Linda's voice responded, What if she doesn't care what people think? She will. Rebecca always cared too much about what others thought. It's her weakness. Tommy looked up at me. I was walking back from the bathroom when I heard them. Something felt wrong, so I started recording. My son had captured Jake's entire plan on video. The next few days were brutal. Jake launched a full campaign against me with other family members. He called my aunts and uncles, spreading his version of events. He posted on social media about how inheritance money was tearing our family apart. Several relatives reached out to me with barely disguised hints that I should do the right thing and share Dad's money with Jake. The pressure was intense. Part of me wanted to give Jake half the inheritance just to make the conflict stop. But every time I considered it, I remembered his lies at Dad's funeral, the way he'd tried to destroy my reputation in front of everyone who mattered to our family. Dad had made his choice for a reason. He'd left the money to me, not Jake. Tommy helped me understand why during one of our evening talks. Grandpa told me something last Christmas, he said. He was worried about Uncle Jake's gambling problem. Gambling problem? Yeah. Uncle Jake owes money to some dangerous people. Grandpa was afraid if he left Jake a lot of cash, it would just disappear. That explained everything. Dad hadn't been playing favorites. He'd been protecting his life savings from Jake's addiction. But Jake's campaign against me was working. More family members started treating me coldly. Old friends stopped returning my calls. Jake had successfully painted me as the greedy sister who'd stolen his rightful inheritance. The breaking point came a week later at Dad's favorite restaurant. Jake had organized a family dinner, supposedly, to heal our wounds and move forward together. I should have known it was a trap. 15 relatives showed up, including Dad's 2 brothers and their wives. Jake had clearly briefed everyone beforehand because the conversation quickly turned to the inheritance. Your father would want his children to share equally, Uncle Bill said. That's the kind of man he was. Aunt Martha nodded. Family is more important than money, Rebecca. Jake sat quietly, letting others do his dirty work. He'd orchestrated the whole thing perfectly. I think Dad knew exactly what he was doing, I replied carefully. Did he know you'd keep everything for yourself? Uncle Bill shot back. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Everyone stared at me, waiting for my response. That's when Tommy stood up. Can I show everyone something? He asked, pulling out his phone. Jake's face went pale. Tommy, this is adult business. This is about my grandfather, Tommy said firmly. I think he'd want everyone to know the truth. He pressed play on his phone. Jake's voice filled the restaurant. Remember, I need everyone thinking she's a terrible daughter. Once they hear about the money, they'll pressure her to do the right thing and split it with me. The silence was deafening. Linda's voice came through next. What if she doesn't care what people think? She will. Rebecca always cared too much about what others thought. It's her weakness. Tommy let the video play until the end. Then he set his phone down and looked around the table. Uncle Jake lied at the funeral, he said quietly. He lied to all of you, and he's been lying about my mom ever since. Jake's face was red. Oh, you little brat. You had no right to record that. I had every right to defend my mother, Tommy replied, just like she had every right to defend herself against your lies. Uncle Bill looked shocked. Jake, is this true? Did you plan this whole thing? Jake opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came out. The evidence was too clear. Aunt Martha shook her head in disgust. How could you lie at your own father's funeral? You don't understand, Jake said desperately. I need that money. I'm in serious trouble. What kind of trouble? Uncle Bill demanded. The truth came pouring out. Jake owed $40,000 to a gambling ring. They'd threatened to hurt Linda if he didn't pay up soon. I thought if I could get half of Rebecca's inheritance, I could pay them off and start fresh, Jake admitted. Linda looked mortified. You told me we just needed the money for a down payment on a house. I was trying to protect you, Jake said weakly. By destroying your sister's reputation? Aunt Martha asked. By lying about her at your father's funeral? Jake had no answer for that. The dinner ended with most of the family apologizing to me. They'd been manipulated by Jake's lies, but they recognized the truth when they saw it. Jake and Linda left early, both looking defeated. Tommy and I stayed to talk with the relatives who remained. Uncle Bill shared stories about Dad that I'd never heard before. Aunt Martha showed me old photos on her phone. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt connected to my family again. Later that night, Tommy and I sat on Dad's back porch looking up at the stars. "I'm proud of you," I told him. "What you did tonight took real courage." "Grandpa always said the truth matters more than keeping peace," Tommy replied. "He wouldn't have wanted Uncle Jake to get away with lying about you." "When did you get so wise?" Tommy smiled. "I learned from the best." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. I thought about Dad and how he'd raised me to value honesty above everything else. Jake had forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way. His gambling addiction had twisted his judgment and made him capable of terrible choices. But I couldn't hate him completely. He was still my brother, still the kid who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with math homework. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I called Jake and asked him to meet me at Dad's house. He arrived looking haggard and ashamed. The past week had clearly taken a toll on him. "I'm not giving you half the inheritance," I said directly, "but I am going to help you." Jake looked confused. "I'll pay off your gambling debt," I continued. $40,000, but there are conditions." Jake's eyes filled with hope and suspicion at the same time. "You have to get professional help for your addiction. Real counseling, not just promises to quit. And you have to publicly apologize for the lies you told about me." "Rebecca, I'm not finished. You also have to promise never to gamble again. If you break that promise, if you ever lie about me again, we're done as family. Forever." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he started crying. "I'm so sorry," he said through his tears. "I was desperate and scared, and I made terrible choices. I never should have lied about you, especially at Dad's funeral." "No, you shouldn't have. I'll do whatever you want. I'll get help. I'll apologize publicly. I'll do anything to make this right." I studied my brother's face. He looked genuinely remorseful, but I'd been fooled by him before. "Tommy will be watching," I said. "If you slip back into old patterns, he'll know, and he won't hesitate to expose you again." Jake nodded. "I understand, and Rebecca, thank you. You didn't have to help me after what I did." "Dad would have wanted me to help you," I replied, "but he also would have wanted you to face consequences for your actions." True to his word, Jake posted a public apology on social media the next day. He admitted to lying at Dad's funeral and explained his gambling addiction. The post was honest and humble, without excuses or self-pity. Several family members commented with support and encouragement. Others shared their own struggles with addiction. Jake started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings that week. I paid off his debt and helped him find a good counselor. It wasn't easy. Recovery never is. Jake had setbacks and moments of weakness, but he kept working at it. Linda stood by him, which surprised me. Their marriage was stronger than I'd realized. 6 months later, Jake had been clean from gambling for over 4 months. He'd gotten a promotion at work and was rebuilding his relationships with family members. Tommy and I flew back to Ohio for the anniversary of Dad's death. We visited his grave together, bringing fresh flowers and his favorite coffee. Jake met us there. He looked healthier than he had in years. "Think about what I did at his funeral every day," Jake said quietly. "I dishonored his memory and hurt you when you were already grieving." "You're making amends now," I replied. "That's what matters." "Do you think he would have forgiven me?" I looked at Dad's headstone. His name was engraved in simple letters: Robert James Mitchell, beloved father and grandfather. "Dad believed in second chances," I said, "but he also believed actions have consequences." Jake nodded. "I'm still paying the consequences. I probably always will." "Good," I said. "That's how you make sure you never forget." We stood together in the cemetery, 3 generations of our family. Dad was gone, but his lessons lived on through us. Tommy had learned courage and integrity. Jake was learning accountability and redemption. I was learning the difference between forgiveness and trust. As we walked back to our cars, Tommy asked a question that had been bothering him. "Mom, do you think Uncle Jake would have kept lying if I hadn't recorded him?" I considered the question carefully. Probably. Sometimes people need to be caught before they can change. So lying at Grandpa's funeral was actually the best thing he could have done? "No," I said firmly. "Lying is never the best choice. But sometimes our worst mistakes lead us to necessary changes. Jake overheard our conversation. Your mom's right, Tommy. What I did was wrong, period. But getting caught forced me to face problems I'd been avoiding for years. And now you're better? I'm working on being better, Jake corrected. Every single day. That evening, we had dinner at the same restaurant where Tommy had played the recording 6 months earlier. This time, the conversation was genuine and warm. Jake talked about his recovery program. Linda shared news about her new job. Tommy told stories about his junior year of high school. I watched my family interact and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Dad's money had caused a crisis, but it had also created an opportunity. We'd been forced to confront ugly truths and make difficult choices. The inheritance was still mine. I'd invested most of it in college funds for Tommy and my two nieces. Jake didn't know about the nieces' funds yet, but he would when they turned 18. Dad would have approved of that decision. He'd always believed in investing in the next generation. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Jake pulled me aside. I need to tell you something, he said. Dad called me about a month before he died, and he told me he was leaving you the money. I was surprised. He did? Yeah, he explained about my gambling problem and said he hoped I'd understand. I told him I did, but honestly, I was angry. That's why I was so ready to believe you were the bad guy when he died. Why are you telling me this now? Jake looked uncomfortable. Because I want you to know that everything I did was planned. It wasn't just grief or confusion. I deliberately tried to destroy your reputation to get what I wanted. The admission hit me harder than I expected. I'd suspected as much, but hearing Jake confirm, it was still painful. Thank you for being honest, I said finally. I'm trying to be honest about everything now. Even when it makes me look worse. Especially when it makes you look worse. Jake smiled sadly. Yeah, I'm learning that too. We said goodbye in the parking lot. Jake and Linda were driving back to their apartment. Tommy and I were flying home to California the next morning. I love you, Rebecca, Jake said as we hugged. I know I have no right to expect you to love me back after what I did. I never stopped loving you, I replied, but I don't trust you yet. Trust has to be earned back. I understand. I'll keep working on it. As Tommy and I drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness for the relationship Jake and I had lost. Hope for the relationship we might rebuild. Gratitude for the son who'd stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. Do you think Uncle Jake will stay clean? Tommy asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. Addiction is a lifelong battle, but I think he has a real chance now. Because he got caught, because he finally faced the truth about himself. Sometimes that's all any of us can do. Tommy was quiet for a moment, then he said something that made me incredibly proud. I'm glad I recorded him. Not because it hurt him, but because it stopped him from hurting you. That took real courage, Tommy. Standing up to adults isn't easy, especially family. Grandpa taught me that doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. I reached over and squeezed my son's hand. Dad's wisdom lived on through another generation. That night, as we packed for our flight home, I found a letter in Dad's desk drawer. It was addressed to me in his careful handwriting. Inside, Dad had written about his decision to leave me the bulk of his estate. He explained his concerns about Jake's gambling and his hope that I would use the money wisely. But the last paragraph was what made me cry. Rebecca, I know this inheritance might cause problems between you and Jake. If it does, remember that money can't buy family, but it can reveal character. Whatever happens, I trust you to make the right choices. You've never let me down, and I know you never will. Love, Dad. I showed the letter to Tommy. He read it twice, then looked up at me with tears in his eyes. He knew Uncle Jake might cause trouble, Tommy said. Yeah, but he also knew we'd handle it the right way. Did we? I thought about everything that had happened since Dad's funeral. The lies, the confrontation, the difficult choices, and the slow process of healing. We told the truth when it mattered most, I said. We helped family when we could. We set boundaries when we had to. Yeah, I think we handled it the right way. The next morning, as our plane lifted off from Ohio, I looked down at the landscape where I'd grown up. Dad was buried somewhere down there, but his influence was everywhere. In Tommy's courage to stand up for what's right. In Jake's difficult journey toward redemption. In my own choice to help rather than punish. The inheritance had been about more than money. It had been a final lesson from a father who understood his children better than they understood themselves. Jake had needed to hit bottom before he could climb back up. I had needed to learn the difference between kindness and weakness. Tommy had needed to discover his own strength and moral compass. All of us had needed to face hard truths about ourselves and each other. As Ohio disappeared beneath the clouds, I felt Dad's presence one last time. Not the physical man I'd lost, but the values and wisdom he'd instilled in all of us. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, "for everything." Tommy was already asleep beside me, his head resting against the window. At 16, he'd shown more integrity than many adults ever manage. I closed my eyes and smiled, thinking about the future. Jake would continue his recovery, one day at a time. Tommy would grow into the kind of man Dad would have been proud to know. And I would carry forward the lessons learned from the hardest year of my life. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most difficult packages. Dad's inheritance had brought pain and conflict, but it had also brought truth and healing. In the end, that was worth more than all the money in the world.